Game 3 of the NBA Finals clearly did not go the way the Golden State Warriors wanted it to go. They find themselves down 2-1, and there's a short turnaround for Game 4, which is tomorrow night, Friday, at 6 p.m. Tip-off at TD Garden in Boston. Brian Witt joins me. I love his insights. He's brilliant. We're going to break down what went wrong in Game 3. I, at least, am going to break down and explain why I am confident that the Warriors will rebound to Game 4. We'll see if Brian feels the same way, but we're going to give you a lot of interesting anecdotes, some great sound bites, some interesting stats, and hopefully give you some reassurance, Dub Nation, because in no way, shape, or form am I pressing the panic button. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. So is Brian Witt, former writer for the Golden State Warriors and NBC Sports Bay Area. You can follow him on Twitter at Witnessed with an extra T in there. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Twitter at Dog Surf Roadshow. Brian, give it to me straight, man. What were your thoughts? What's your feedback, your reaction to Game 3 of the NBA Finals?
Yeah, that was a tough one for the Warriors. The problems that the Celtics caused the Warriors last night are not easy fixes, and so that is. It's not just that they lost, right, and are now down 2-1, and historically the winner of Game 3 has won something like 85% of final series or something like that. So that's working against the Warriors. But then if you look deeper into the reasons why they lost and how they might fix that within 48 hours, there aren't necessarily tons of obvious and easy answers. As we all saw, they got absolutely obliterated on the boards, and to the degree that it was like deflating, right? I mean, those possessions where they have, I think you're on mute, Cyrus. But
thank you for that. No, it was 40. Thank you for that. It was 47-31 on the glass. And then the offensive side is where they particularly got killed because these are momentum killers, especially 15-6. The Celtics out rebounded the Warriors on the offensive glass. Yeah, it was ridiculous. Continue on, please.
Yeah, I mean those possessions where they were getting 3 or 4 shots and scoring on the third or fourth one, they're just backbreakers, right? And
yes.
And I think particularly after all the effort that the Warriors put in to climb out of the deep hole and actually take the lead.
Yes.
That in itself was very energy consuming. And then we saw what happened in the fourth. It just seemed like the Celtics had more left in the tank. And they really imposed their physical will on the Warriors, and Warriors didn't really have much that they could answer back with. So, obviously the boards were a major issue. Turnovers, again, the number of turnovers last night, it was only like 13 or 14 when the main guys checked out at the end of the fourth quarter, I believe, but it was more the timing of the turnovers, I think, and the situations in which they came.
Yeah, they lost the turnover battle 16-12. You're right. It wasn't like a huge discrepancy, but you're right. The timing of them were brutal, but yeah,
the timing and the people who were committing the turnovers, I think, just really piled on. You have, I mean, the Warriors are going to go as far as Steph Curry and Draymond Green take them, right? And that's pretty much always been the case. And when your two most critical players are constantly making, some boneheaded errors, the other, there's not really other places for the team to turn. And it just seemed like whenever the Warriors, would string a couple stops together or get a couple baskets in a row, there would be a boneheaded turnover the next time down where they're trying to throw the ball across the court through four guys, and then that's followed by a defensive foul or something like that, and next thing you know, it's like a 7-point swing right there. Obviously the Warriors had one 7-point swing of their own, but I don't think they can count on that occurring very often. Big time win for Boston. I think they should be feeling very, very confident. If the Warriors did not have as much finals experience as they do, I would be a lot more concerned about them. But I do think that they will play a lot better on Friday in Game 4. Agreed. And I think those two areas, the rebounding, particularly on the defensive glass, and then the turnovers, the truly careless turnovers, I expect they'll be more attentive to those two areas, and they're going to have to be, I think, in order to even this series.
Yeah, and you said something interesting a couple minutes ago, which I want to touch on, and it harps to my entire premise of why the Warriors lost, which was that Steve Kerr just got outcoached. And there were a myriad of variables that lead to that. For starters, you talk about the energy thing at the end of the third quarter leading into the fourth. The Warriors took a lead 83-82, and then they relinquished it shortly after that, and then they just slowly watched it slip away. The Warriors' biggest strength against the Boston Celtics is their depth. They can go 11-12 in their bench without sacrificing talent. They can go 11-12 into their bench while maintaining strength, while maintaining dominance. And for some reason, Steve Kerr last night in Game 2, he gave Gary Payton II 25 minutes. In Game 3, he gave Gary Payton II 11 minutes. In Game 2, he gave Nemanja Bjelica 11 minutes. In Game 3, he gave him 3 minutes. None of those in the second half. Andre Iguodala, in my opinion, was the lone bright spot from Game 1. When he played defense on Jason Tatum, for example, in the 11 minutes Iguodala did play in Game 1, he guarded Tatum for 3 of those minutes. Tatum did not have a single field goal attempt during that entire time. He just didn't even put up a shot because Iguodala disrupted him that much. When Iguodala played in the brief 2 minutes in Game 3, they brought him in primarily because Marcus Smart was eating them up in the paint with repeated layups for easy baskets. They brought Iguodala in at the end of the first half to stymie that, and he was successful. They befriended a score, and the Celtics looked frustrated, and then the Warriors went into the half down 12 instead of much more than that. And for some reason, in Game 3, when we revert back to this energy thing, right, where instead of going to his bench, he gave Andrew Wiggins 40 minutes when he could have lived with 35 from him. He gave Klay Thompson 39 minutes when I feel like he could have lived with 34 from that. Jordan Poole did not have a great game. He was horrible defensively, average at best offensively. He only went 1 for 4 from 3. Gave Jordan Poole 25 minutes. You could have taken 5 minutes away from there. These minutes could have gone to a Gary Payton II. These minutes could have gone to a Nemanja Bjelica. Iguodala could have been a difference maker. And all these three players, Gary Payton less so, but more so certainly with Bjelica and Iguodala, they could have helped with the offensive glass. Kevon Looney, who has been easily the best matchup against Robert Williams III, played 10 minutes less than Robert Williams III. Kevon Looney saw 16 minutes total. Robert Williams III played 26 minutes. This is just the tip of the iceberg for what I saw from Kerr. I mean, the aggressiveness was not there. You saw the battle for loose balls, where the Warriors just lost that flat out. So the team didn't come out ready. I feel like coaching has to bear some responsibility for that. Klay Thompson, And game 2 was assigned to lesser offensive players, bigger players, but not as skilled. We saw Klay Thompson guarding Al Horford a lot in game 2, for example. That was wildly effective. In game 3, we saw them go back to Klay guarding Tatum and Brown, and he got burned. I don't know why they did that. When we come back, I would love to get your reaction to what I just said from all that, because I don't think Steve Kerr deserves a pass for this game. I think he bears the brunt of the responsibility. Clearly, the players have to take some responsibility as well. But first, we have to tell people how to save a ton of money, because in this day and age, Brian, I don't know about you, but gas prices are asinine, in my opinion. I cannot believe what the prices are at the pump. And one way drivers can save money is by going to Rock Auto. With the increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure those pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning, like, is your Honda Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, when you can go to rockauto.com at home, where you can avoid someone like me who's sick and making other people sick. You can avoid that. You can stay at home. You can even just use your mobile device and just go to rockauto.com. You can save time and money. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Again, that same Honda Odyssey, a fuel pump from a chain store, is $353, just $216 from Rock Auto. They're a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck, right locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The ultimate NBA mock draft starts June 16th with over 50 insiders. Nothing equals the ultimate NBA mock draft. The Locked On NBA Big Board Draft experts, plus the Odyssey insiders. First pick is June 16th. Search Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and follow now so you don't miss a pick. And follow Brian Witt on Twitter at Witnessed with an extra T in there reflecting his last name. That is 2 T's. Brian Witt, W-I-T-T. You can follow me on Twitter at DocSurfRoadshow. Brian, what are your thoughts on my scathing criticism of Steve Kerr? I love him as a head coach. I've never once called for his head, but I feel like criticism is due when your performance just simply is not there. And in game 3 of the NBA Finals, I thought Kerr botched it. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So I think one thing we've seen throughout the playoffs from the Celtics is they are incredibly good at bouncing back from a loss. I think they might even be undefeated following a loss in the playoffs.
Yes, in the postseason.
And what that tells me is that Ime Udoka and his staff have been really good at identifying, their weaknesses in defeats and figuring out ways to turn that around and put the opposition in a place of where they are now going to have to react. And to me, that's, what happened last night, really. Whether it was a strategic change or more just a mentality change, I do think it was actually more of the latter.
Agreed.
You could tell that Udoka got through to his players, and they really beat the crap out of the Warriors last night, and so there's only so much that Kerr can do from the sidelines in that situation. It is on him to put his team in the best position to succeed, but
yes,
as we saw last night, there were several players that are very important to the Warriors' success who, from the get-go, just did not have a good night. That was probably the worst I can recall Draymond Green playing in a game that was important
Easily, man. Yeah.
Otto Porter was really bad in the first half. Like, not. It always starts at the defensive end for me, and you could just
Agreed.
tell that they were not engaged. They were kind of running around cluelessly, getting lost on defense. I'm not even going to really spend much time on Jordan Poole because I've done it before, and he's not providing any resistance whatsoever out there.
None. Nope.
And so I think really what happened was, there were several weak points for the Celtics to attack, and enough that it really didn't. Kerr was trying to scramble to figure out ways to plug those holes, and that's why you ended up with some of with the minutes distribution that you did. I'm looking kind of at the minutes and plus minus, and Gary Payton didn't play much in the second half, if at all. I'm only saying that because he played 11 minutes total, and he played a bunch of the first half, and he was a minus 12, minus 13
actually. Yeah.
Which, if you go back and watch, like, he's guarding, I think it was Tatum, and on a ridiculous step back three, kind of from the wing, and then I believe he was guarding Marcus Smart on the banked in three. So, some of these, and if you watch Peyton's reaction on that first 3-pointer that I referenced, he's just cannot believe that it went in. So, some good shot making, some lucky shot making kind of distorts those numbers a bit. But, we saw the Warriors almost let the game get away from them in the second quarter, right? And they had to hang on for dear life just to keep it in a spot to where they could believe that they could, come back in the third quarter. And so I think Kerr kind of at that point had to make some decisions as far as these lineups aren't working. We can't go back to these. We're going to have to do something else. And that's why the Warriors basically went with a 6-man, 7-man, 6.5-man rotation in the second half. So if you're looking from game to game as far as minutes and stuff, a lot of that is going to change depending on game flow and garbage time minutes and yada yada.
Yada yada yada. I just watched Seinfeld
over
recently,
the best part.
episode.
Yeah.
But my point is, Brian, why? Like, I feel like you're hesitating on criticizing Kerr for that 6.5-man rotation. Like why? Like, I guess you're right. Gary Payton II, nobody was playing good in that first half outside of Steph and Curry and maybe Klay Thompson. Like, I didn't see much from anyone else. Yet for some reason, Kerr just routinely just loses faith and trust in Gary Payton II the moment he sees, not the greatest output at the beginning of the game. Like, I don't understand that lack of trust he has in Gary Payton II. It's evident. And again, Bielitsa, a player I feel like yeah.
I don't think he has a lack of trust in Gary Payton. I think we have to, specifically with Payton, we have to remember that he's, still just coming back from a pretty serious injury. And I think we've seen, game 2, when he went up for the dunk or layup and they called Jaylen Brown for the foul, and
that was game 3.
Probably didn't.
Yeah.
Probably didn't touch him, but I think that's a sign of some rust maybe, or just, and I think watching him out on the court, maybe his conditioning isn't where he would want it to be, but no, I don't think really anyone had a great day yesterday on the Warriors, except for probably I thought Klay was really good. you reference his sort of high minute total. That was out of necessity, right? I mean, he almost single-handedly kept the Warriors in it in the sort of middle of the game when he kind of found his groove, and I think he scored 12 or 14 straight points for the Warriors. And if he isn't in there, if he isn't doing that, who knows? What the second half looks like, and so when you get beaten in the way that they did, I think you can point fingers all around. They were not prepared. They were not prepared for the Celtics physicality, and there's not really an excuse for that. I think everyone who's been paying attention to the series knew what was coming. There's no, Draymond absolutely should have known what was coming heading into that environment. This is not their first go around, right? So I do think it's fair to criticize Kerr and everyone on the team along those lines. I will also say that the Celtics are really good, and as Kerr could have a great game, but if Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are playing as well as they did last night, the Celtics are going to be really tough to beat, no matter how well the Warriors are playing. And so I think we do have to give a lot of credit to the Celtics. I'm not, I've seen people saying that this is the best team that the Warriors have faced throughout the dynasty. I don't know if I'm there yet, but they're really good, and they cause the Warriors a lot of problems, and they kind of really directly at the Warriors' weaknesses. And so, but this is how the finals go. You play a game and you adjust, and we saw what happened in game one. And how the Warriors came out in game two, which was obviously the best game that they've played as a team, and obviously the best game that Draymond has played in the series. So it's going to require a similar kind of turnaround. It's going to be even tougher because they're on the road in a really crazy atmosphere. But it's now or never. This is, we know that it's not impossible to come back from a 3-1 deficit, but I don't think the Warriors want to put themselves in that position whatsoever.
Hell no.
So
No, hell no, absolutely not, man. And I just want to add to what you're saying real quick. Gary Payton II, he missed that dunk in last night's game. He was fouled on that play, though. I know Jaylen Brown was saying challenge it, but the moment he saw the replay, Jaylen Brown was tugging on his jersey.
Right. That one was definitely a foul on Jaylen Brown. I was referring to the one which I do think was game two, when Payton kind of had the breakaway, and Brown did get called for the foul, but upon replay, it looked like he didn't touch him, maybe.
Gotcha.
And the Warriors got away with one.
All I'm saying, Brian, is that it's a lot easier for me to stomach a loss, and it's a lot easier for me to accept the notion that the Celtics beat the Warriors if I see the Warriors' full squad out there, if I see their full potential, and that includes their depth. That is clearly their biggest strength against the Celtics, is that they have a deep reservoir to dip into. And for some reason, they didn't do that last night. And I'm just baffled. Like Klay Thompson, you're right. Fine. Leave him out there for 39 minutes because offensively he was sound. But defensively, I don't want to see him guarding Jaylen Brown anymore. He's guarded Jaylen Brown in this series for 15 minutes now. And in those 15 minutes, Jaylen Brown has shot 6 for 11 against Klay Thompson for 55% shooting. And he's 2 for 5 from threes when Klay Thompson's guarding him. I don't like that matchup. Klay Thompson, I don't think can guard Jaylen Brown. And so there's just matchups like that where I just feel like the coaching staff, I don't know what happened. I don't know if they just panicked because of those early foul calls. The officials, I think, certainly botched that game in a lot of ways. Stephen Curry, to put it in perspective, had one free throw attempt total the entire game. He was attacking the rim routinely. In fact, I saw a stat where I believe, I don't know if it's this series or the entire, I think it's a series. He's driven inside the paint 39 times. And from that, he has 2 free throw attempts. Like, that's asinine. Like, I don't know why the refs are just letting people hack him routinely. And that's clearly an issue. So, I mean, that plays a part in this for sure. And those early foul calls and Steph, I feel like, really got into Kerr's head, because you saw Kerr starting to mess with Stephen Curry's minutes, and I just didn't see the rationale to that. I didn't see the logic behind that. Ultimately, I hate criticizing Kerr, man. I'm never going to sit here and say replace him. I'm never going to sit here and say there's a better option out there. But sometimes Kerr he screws the pooch. Like, and this was a game where he did that. Now, the Warriors are in a hostile environment, and we're going to talk about that because Draymond Green and Klay Thompson said some fascinating things after the game in the press conference, which we're going to play in just a moment. But the Warriors, folks, clearly need to eat their Built Bars. They came out lackadaisical. There is no spinning it, man. The Celtics wanted that game more. I just wish the Warriors bench would have gotten more minutes so that we could have seen the full potential from the Warriors, given they did have a lead in the third quarter. But look, if you eat those Built Bars, these are packed with protein, and the protein is highly digestible protein. It's collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides a ton of health benefits. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. I have found my official hands down favorite flavor, which is the Built Granola Bar. They have a chocolate peanut butter flavor, which I absolutely love. And there's a wide variety to choose from. Just go to the website. You can order a sample pack to determine what your favorite flavor is. Just go to built.com. Use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Again, the promo code is LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. Make sure to go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board. Host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA draft, mock draft, player rankings, and, of course, the big boards. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Brian Witt is free and available on Twitter. You've been on fire, my man, lately on your Twitter account. I love it. You can follow him on Twitter at Witnessed with an extra T in there. And you can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Twitter at DogSurfRoadshow. I got to play some sound bites here because there was a lot going around. Let's start with Draymond Green in the post-game press conference. You and I watched this before we started recording, where a reporter asked Draymond Green about whether or not the X's and O's he's allegedly revealing on his podcast is aiding the Boston Celtics. And here's his response to that.
I found listening to your podcast recaps the last couple of games pretty interesting. Are you conscious at all of what you're saying about the X's and O's, the game plans, the adjustments could be making their way back to Boston staffers and influencing their decision-making at all?
No. I don't say much different on the podcast than I say to you right here. So, nah. What's the X's and O's that I said on the podcast?
Yeah, actually, the only real thing I noticed that really stood out, you talked about how to cover White, Smart, and Horford differently between games 1 and 2. That was really only.
Oh yeah, that was just contested shots. If that's X's and O's, then you reaching for something. It's all good though. Keep going. Reaching heavy. The only thing you find that they are taking X's and O's away from your podcast. Well, the only thing you said is White, Smart, and Horford.
I'm not trying to blow it up.
I mean, you went for it, but yeah. Hey, respect. Appreciate the podcast promo you just gave me, though. The Draymond Green show. Next time, just mention it that way.
You got it.
All right, bet.
Monty in the middle here. Draymond, what most disappointed you about the way you guys played tonight, and yourself?
I was soft. That's what was most disappointing to me for us. Monty, how much X's and O's you get from the podcast? Clearly, this guy, hey, I don't know, man. Maybe that's the IQ level over this way. Shit. Respect. You got something else, Monty? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Not just you, but would you?
And he's referring to Monty Poole, your former colleague at NBC Sports Bay Area. Man, I respect tremendously. I love Monty Poole. He's welcome on this show anytime if he ever wants to come on. Now, I'm going to play one more soundbite, Brian, before I throw it to you. This morning, Draymond, or maybe it was last night, published a new episode of his podcast, which he's been getting some criticism from. Kendrick Perkins is the obvious one, but Kendrick Perkins and Draymond Green have a beef that goes back who knows when, probably the NBA Finals. But Isaiah Thomas, Hall of Famer Isaiah Thomas, former point guard for the Detroit Pistons, also levied criticism on Draymond Green, saying that his podcast is taking focus away from his what should be his primary focus, which is the NBA Finals. And so this was Draymond this morning or last night, whenever it was published, addressing those concerns and kind of following up on that little altercation he had with that reporter last night. So here's Draymond Green adding some additional context on his podcast.
This helps. I had a reporter ask me tonight, like, the reporter said, he said, do you think, do you worry that you're giving away X's and O's on your podcast when you're doing a podcast? That opposing coaches are watching you and they're taking the X's and O's that you're talking about and they're using them. I asked him, I said, no, not at all. But what X's and O's conversation did you take away from the podcast? He said, well, the only X and O conversation that I took away from the podcast was that you were referencing that when you were talking about how you need to stop Marcus Smart, Al Horford, and Derek White after game one. Said, that's the only X's and O's I took from the podcast. Said, oh, so you're just searching for something. You're of the masses that Draymond shouldn't be doing a podcast during the NBA Finals. Sorry, sir, but saying we need to stop Derek White, Al Horford, and Marcus Smart is not really X and O's. Unless that is as high as your IQ level reaches in the game of basketball. And if that is as high as your IQ level reaches, then I totally understand thinking that is X's and O's. But that's not quite X's and O's. Nonetheless, this whole narrative of Draymond's focused on podcasting and blah, blah, blah. Listen, y'all gonna get this podcast. Like I told y'all at the beginning of these playoffs, this podcast ain't going nowhere. I'm going to leave the arena. I'm going to return to this hotel room. I'm going to return to my home when we're back in San Francisco, and I'm going to film this podcast. It would then be uploaded by Jackson. It would be edited by Jackson and uploaded by Jackson, and then you will turn this podcast on and you will listen. And that's just that. You're going to get this podcast.
So that was Draymond Green. And look, we played it. Clearly people are listening to the podcast. Your thoughts, Brian?
Right. So I'm going to cover this from two angles. So first, the reporter. I've been in his position before. For those of you who haven't or don't know what it's like, so the finals post media room, or where they have the press conferences, it's crazy. There's like 80 different writers all lined up next to each other with their laptops out on their laps, and they bring up one or two players at a time, and you all hear the same answers. But as a journalist, you're trying to come up with an original storyline, something that you can distinguish your story from everything else that's going to be coming out the next day. So I I'm assuming that that's what the report, where his mind was at and why he asked that question. And in that sense, I think it's a totally fair and innocent question. I did not listen to that. I have not listened to those episodes of Draymond's podcast, so I don't know if he expanded beyond those comments and into any more X's and O's. But to Draymond's point, if that was the full extent of it, there's nothing that Draymond is going to say on his podcast that Boston's coaching staff isn't already going to be figuring out on their own. Draymond is a basketball genius. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
The guy is
yes.
incredibly smart.
Agreed.
But a team coaching staff is not just the head coach and like the two main assistants and the team trainer. There's like a whole team of the staff, and you have video coordinators. You have, actually, Gary Payton, before he got his confirmed spot with the Warriors, he offered to, or he asked about becoming a video intern for the Warriors.
Yep.
So like that's the kind of thing that Gary Payton would have been doing potentially, is going back and watching the games and coming up with adjustments that you present to the higher ups on the coaching staff, and those the good ones are implemented. So that's the other side of this. I concur 100% with Draymond as far as, if you think that the podcast is the reason why he's been inconsistent or underperforming or what have you, you're wrong. You're just wrong. The fact of the matter is, Draymond the time that he spends doing the podcast, would it be better spent if he was just sitting in bed watching TV? Like that, they are human beings who just played an extremely physically demanding game. They're going to be recovering anyway. So Draymond is doing this during his recovery time. It's not preventing him from recovering.
Right.
And I think, a lot of these comments that say that it is a distraction are coming from people who played in or are from a different generation. And they, I think, are confused as to the actual demand, what is demanded of Draymond in producing that podcast. I just think they're not necessarily familiar with the actual mechanisms behind it, and it's not as if he's spending all week planning out what he's going to talk about. He's speaking from his chest about what just transpired, and frankly, as a media, those of us in media, it should be praising him for it, because we want to hear from the players more. We want their unique perspectives. We don't want the same boilerplate, nothing burger responses. And obviously Draymond is not one to give you those. And so,
right.
Look, it's easy to pile on Draymond after last night. He played horribly. He'll tell you that first thing he did. The team takes its cue from him. And and especially with all the attention that was paid to him in the lead up to the game, he deserves to wear it, as I tweeted out, for a couple days. But it's not the podcast that's the reason why the Warriors are down 2-1. I mean, give me a break.
And no, you're right. And just to add to that, I mean, I've thought about this because I host a daily podcast, and I'm not gonna lie, man. Especially I've been fighting COVID for 2+ weeks, and for me, this podcast takes a lot of energy. Like when I'm not hosting it, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about the angles to present. I'm thinking about, what's interesting, how I should, present each show. But I clearly don't have Draymond's perspective of being an active professional athlete where beside his regular tasks, which is practicing, preparing physically, doing whatever it takes to prepare mentally, he also has to address the media on an almost daily basis. And all he's doing with his podcast is just extending that, is just, answering the same questions that media members ask him, only he's controlling the narrative with his own platform. And I agree. Ultimately, it's one thing if he was having like guests on his show and he was having to like prepare for guests and having questions to ask them, or if he was producing his own shows. But I don't know who this Jackson person is, but clearly he has someone else doing all the work for him. Yeah, I don't think the podcast is the problem. I could understand people thinking it's a bad look, but at the same time, when you look at it on its face and you look at it logically, again, I don't see what the issue is. I do want to throw some last before we're going to start wrapping things up here. I want to add Draymond Green a couple of really wild stats about just how poorly he has been playing. He has committed as many fouls in the NBA Finals, 15, as he scored points. So he's committed 15 fouls. He's scored 15 points. And this stat is, and these are both courtesy of StatMuse, and this stat is particularly alarming to me. The Warriors' defensive rating in these NBA Finals, when Draymond Green is on the floor, these are points given up per 100 possessions. When Draymond is on the floor, the defensive rating is 113.6. When he's off the floor, 105.1. The Warriors are allowing 8.5 fewer points per 100 possessions when Draymond Green is on the bench. That's alarming. I don't take comfort in that. But if there's any reassurance to this, and Brian, I'm guessing you agree with me on this, is that I do not see Draymond Green coming out in Game 4 with this kind of performance again. I don't think he's going to perform like this again this series. It's a shame that the Warriors are a team that sometimes need these wake-up calls. This is where they're at. It's hard for them to find that extra push, that extra motivation. They oftentimes need urgency to truly play their best. And sometimes it takes this, being down 2-1 in the NBA Finals to find that extra energy. They were down 2-1 in 2015 to the Memphis Grizzlies, came back and won the series. They were down 2-1 in the 2015 NBA Finals to the Cleveland Cavaliers, won the series. They were down 2-1. In fact, they were down 3-1 to the Oklahoma City Thunder in the 2016 Western Conference Finals, came back and won the series. This is not unfamiliar territory for the Golden State Warriors. So that is why I'm certainly not pressing any panic buttons at this juncture. I want to play this last sound clip. This is from Klay Thompson, because the Boston crowd was rather unseemly. Literally 5 minutes before tip-off, there was a sign posted on their Megatron, on their Jumbotron, on their big screen, listing a code of ethic for the fans. Chief among them, do not yell profanity. So what do? They have a unison crowd chant screaming, "F you, Draymond." And so Klay Thompson addressed that. And look, I mean, there are children at these games. This is also Boston. Different cultures depending on different regions. I'm not justifying it, obviously. I'm just trying to make sense of it. But here is Klay Thompson talking about that.
What were your impressions of the crowd and the environment tonight, and how much was that a factor in the game?
It was not a factor. We played in front of rude people before, dropping F-bombs with children in the crowd. Real classy. Good job, Boston.
What were your...
Yeah, I think that's well put. Any last thoughts? I feel like we've covered all bases. Again, Game 4 is going to be tomorrow. Again, I'm not worried, man. This was a game that the Warriors lost. It happens. This is the NBA Finals. They're facing a worthy adversary. They're gonna have to win one at the Garden. You brought up that stat earlier today about what history shows from Game 3s. I say throw those numbers aside; they mean nothing. because all it takes is a Warriors winning game 4, and suddenly it's a best of 3 with the Warriors having home court advantage. I feel strongly the Warriors are going to win in game 4. I really do. And I hope, and I really think the Warriors are an intelligent enough and experienced enough group to make the necessary adjustments and come back in game 4. I do think that they're the better team still. I hope I've made a compelling argument as to the why of that based on history, based on numerous measurables. Brian, your final thoughts on game 4. What do you expect? And your thoughts, please.
I expect the Warriors to come out with the same sort of aggression and energy that they did in game 2. I mean, if you go back and watch game 2, the very first possession, Draymond ties up Al Horford. They go to the ground. It's a jump ball. That set the tone. And granted, that was at home, and it got the crowd all into it right away, and they don't have that benefit in Boston. But Draymond has to set the tone, and it has to be an aggressive one, and the rest of the team has to follow suit. That's key number 1. And beyond that, I think it's, there are some strategic things that they can do as far as how they're. I thought Boston did a good job of getting the one-on-one matchups that they wanted out of pick and rolls in game 3. It seemed like for pretty much the entire fourth quarter that's what, I mean, it was a lot of Tatum ISOs, and it wasn't necessarily the same guy defending him each time, but they were able to kind of pick and choose which way they wanted to go.
Right.
So I think, the Warriors can be smarter about how they get involved in those situations. I think on the other side of the court, Robert Williams, I said he was going to be a major problem coming into the series, and people doubted that because he's hurt. I hope by now you realize that he is a defensive beast. And
game 3 he
problem.
was. Games 1 and 2 he was neutralized a little bit. I mean, the injury clearly played a factor, but you're right. Game 3 he was lights out.
He's in their head.
Yeah, he is.
And so, if you take it in and challenge him at the rim, you're asking to get blocked. I still think that the Warriors can't be entirely deterred by that. They need to go they need to drive to the rim with intent, because they are going to draw fouls sometimes, and those will add up and potentially get Williams in foul trouble, or Tatum in foul trouble, or whatever. It could mess with how the Celtics want to employ their rotations. And I think they can somewhat neutralize Williams by involving him more on the perimeter, bringing him out. I thought he looked pretty good physically last night. I mean, considering where he's at, he's not, his lateral movement is not there necessarily, and so involve him in ball screens at the top, at the perimeter. Gonna have to get creative in how you do that, because Boston's gonna try to avoid that. Although I am a bit confused by their strategy in terms of defending Steph, which Steph is taking full advantage of, and it sounds like Steph, had his availability a few minutes ago, and he says he's playing in game 4. And
and let's quickly touch on that. Just to add on that, Shams Charania reported that there is no MRI, and that Steph does expect to play in game 4. I really did not think it was that serious of an injury, given that he continued playing until about the 2-minute mark, and Steve Kerr pulled him out only because the game was over. And I think
just due to who he is and his history, it's natural to be concerned with any sort of lower leg injury. But obviously, this is good news. And
Great news.
hopefully he is not affected by it. He's putting up literally a historic scoring line so far in 3 games of the finals. I mean, in terms of he's averaging actually 36 minutes per game in the finals, and if you look at per 36 scoring averages in NBA Finals history, there aren't many who are above what Steph's currently pacing at.
Right.
So, and he's shooting, I believe, 49% from the field and 49% from 3-point range. So, keep shooting, Steph. They're going to need Jordan Poole to give more than he has. It's just how it is. And so hopefully he can get it going in game 4. I wonder if maybe, thinking back to the other times that the Warriors have been down 2-1 and turned it around, if you look back to those series, they made, in almost all of the instances, they made kind of a big lineup adjustment that helped turn things around. They're not going to change the starting lineup, and I don't think you're going to see a major contributor taken out of it. But I do wonder if someone like Jonathan Kuminga might give them a little bit of a boost in the areas where they need a boost, or even after Moody. What we saw last night. I mean, you hear the announcers talking over and over again about how small and unathletic the Warriors are. First off, like, unathletic, come on, these guys are NBA players. Like, Andrew Wiggins is like the most athletic guy in the NBA. But when Kuminga's out there, he scores and he rebounds. And the Warriors need guys in this series who can battle in the paint, who can battle on the boards, who can create their own shot, who can score in one-on-one scenarios. And so it is asking a ton to put Kuminga out there in that situation, down 2-1 in game 4 of the NBA Finals. And I'm not saying play him 25 minutes, but maybe, I could see him having more of a use than how he's been used so far. It could totally backfire. He's a rookie, and the last thing you want to do is, commit 2 quick fouls and have Boston in the bonus all quarter. But I think they gotta try, some new things here, and throw some things at the Celtics that maybe they're not expecting. And I think maybe Kuminga, in short spells at least, would be a way to do that. But it's going to be interesting.
And I honestly think, they found a recipe that works in game 2. I don't know why people are just forgetting that. Like, a heavy swarming defense and a deep bench proved incredibly effective against the Celtics team. I was so happy seeing the 9-man rotation in game 2 that included, again, Gary Payton II playing 25 minutes, Bjelica getting serious minutes. And I would not be opposed to Andre Iguodala playing those bench minutes when Draymond Green comes out of the game. You can make it a 10-man rotation. I'm never opposed to seeing Jonathan Kuminga. I think Moses Moody could even make an impact, because with his 7'1" wingspan, he's a strong player. He weighs 220 at 6'5". I wouldn't be opposed to that. But I just hope Steve Kerr remembers that they did find a formula that works in game 2. Even pick and rolls on the offense, simplify the offense a little bit to get Draymond more involved, to build confidence for him on that side of the ball. It worked. They found a formula. They found a recipe for success in game 2. They did not repeat it in game 3. The why of that is beyond me. But again, I have faith in this Warriors organization, given they are incredibly intelligent, that they're going to respond and make the correct adjustments. I also think the short turnaround is going to benefit the Warriors more, simply because Al Horford, Robert Williams III, and Marcus Smart have been benefiting from these longer layoffs, and they're not going to get that in Game 4. So I think that's going to be a huge favor for the Warriors as well. This looks like a series that's just going to go back and forth. The Warriors are going to have to win 2 in a row to win the series. The question is where that second in a row is going to come in, and just come here and we'll break it down. Brian, it's always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for your insights as always. Hope to have you on again soon. If we can make this a weekly thing, great. I'm always on your schedule when you can fit time, because you have that amazing family you're taking care of. Brother, thank you, man. I can't say that enough. You can follow. Any last words? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Thanks again for having me on, and
yeah, man,
enjoy doing this. And I hope the listeners don't mind hearing from me every so often.
No, I think they love it, man. I personally love it, and thank you, man. And you can follow Brian Witt on Twitter @Witnessed with an extra T in there. Follow me on Twitter @DogSurFrocho, and follow this program on Twitter @LockedOnDubs. Thank you, everyone. Go Warriors, and we'll see you tomorrow. Later.